Hey everyone, welcome back to Talkin Shop with ShopSabre. Today we're going to talk about why you should consider investing in new equipment when things are a little slow. But first, I am your host, Brandon Bombardo. I am here with Girl Scout cookie salesman Nick Peters.
Hello, Brandon.
How you doing, buddy?
My voice just cracked when I said that because I was laughing and talking.
You love your Girl Scout cookie sales.
I haven't had one yet.
You never do, though. I'm not like, you sell more Girl Scout cookies for a guy who doesn't eat Girl Scout cookies.
I know, but I love them. But if I have one, I'll have like seven
boxes. Yeah, exactly.
So, for the record, Thin Mints are terrible.
What?
Worst.
Thin Mints with ice cream is great.
No.
Yep.
Let me guess, you put in mint ice cream?
Yeah, I do, actually.
Good Lord.
Mint's my favorite ice cream as well. This week's topic, though, right? Topic for discussion is why, when you're slowing down, can it be a perfect time to invest in equipment? Because I think naturally people think opposite, right?
Probably, yeah.
I mean, I think you said it earlier. When things slow down, I'm not spending money, right?
Right.
You kind of made that comment. It seems like a good thing for me to spend money when I'm not making it. But I think that's our human nature is to like, well, clam up, don't spend any money, quick, and you actually kill your business.
Sure.
You slow things down. And so, investing during a downtime often brings the most success. And I remind people of that because I think when you look at entrepreneurs, right, and you look at investors, the people who gain the most wealth often gain the most wealth during downturns. And it's because of the fact that they are using their capital that they have made during good times to reinvest and to buy at times of lower cost. Correct? I mean, you get the best deals when things aren't slow, technically. So I think that's the mentality that I want people to start thinking about is how can you create more wealth using the wealth you've already created? And I think the one thing I would ask, Nick, is don't you like to learn how to use your new tools right away?
100%.
Right? I mean, you buy something new, like cameras. That's your thing, right? You're big into cameras. When you buy a new camera, do you go play with it and like try to learn it? Or do you just start shooting with it right away on the one setting that you know works?
Definitely take time to learn.
Right.
You want a better time to learn than when you're a little bit slow, right?
And that's exactly my point is, this is why I want to talk about that today. But before we dive into that, some of our viewers sent us some questions and comments, and I want to address those, and then we'll jump into this week's topic. So, Nick, you start with the questions. I'll throw the answers.
Perfect. Question number 1. Try to change it every week.
Every week you change it.
Standard definition versus HD plasma. Why should I spend more money?
That's a great question, actually, because I can't answer that question without knowing who you are.
Well, let me answer it. What would you invest your money in? A standard definition TV or high definition TV?
Not the same. Not the same.
Oh.
I liked your thought there. Don't listen to Nick. That's not the answer. The reason I said I can't answer it without knowing who you are is because what you're doing will largely depend on what technology you should be using. Because high definition plasma, it gives you a cleaner result right out of the box because you can run shield gases and you can use, an additional gas with the cutting and therefore it gives you a better burn, right? So more oxygen tends to, as everybody knows, add oxygen to fire and you end up with, a bigger fire.
More fire.
So, it's the same sort of thing with plasmas that you can add mixing gases, right? You can add something to it, nitrogen, oxygen, whatever, depending on what you're cutting. So depending on what materials you cut, you can get a very different result. And in some materials, you might not see a result difference. Like example, we posted a picture recently of some 10 gauge mild steel that we did with an air plasma. That's using a Hypertherm PowerMax series cutter. And it is incredible, incredible quality that you're really, even if you do it with high definition, you're probably not going to improve on that. So spending money on an HD cutter for that application, you probably don't gain enough to make it worth the investment. But there are applications when you start cutting thicker materials or you start cutting, more, tolerance specific bolt ready holes, right? Things where you got to drop a bolt in through it. And you want to take some of the bevel of the cutout, right? The angularity of the cut. That's where HD starts to come in because HD cutting is going to have less bevel than a standard plasma, cutter will. And therefore that's where you gain it. It's in the angularity of the cut, the dross you're going to see on the backside. You gain something with high definition plasma versus, a standard definition.
Great answer.
Thanks.
You sound like a really, really good non-commission paid salesman.
I made that up
You
myself.
explained that very well.
Thanks.
And you got through that really big word without stumbling.
I appreciate that.
The angularity.
Thank you.
It's really good. Proud of you.
Thanks. Okay, question 2.
Question number 2. At what point should I consider a tube cutting machine versus a pipe cutting fourth axis for my machine?
At the point where you have speed demands. It's a good question because we do sell pipe cutters for the Sidekick series and the Shopmaster, and then we sell the TC, which is our tube cutter. Depending on what you're doing, if I have to cut one pipe a month, well, I probably don't need to buy a dedicated machine for that.
Sure.
But if I'm going to cut pipe every single day, I'm better off to buy a machine designed to cut pipe. And so, as an example, if I'm a roll cage manufacturer, I build race cars, I probably should buy a tube cutting machine. Versus if I'm a guy who's going to make one race car for myself one time, I could probably get by with a fourth axis and save myself some money. Yep. So that's some thought there. But the other thing is what am I cutting? Because if I'm just cutting a hole in the pipe, or I'm doing, I don't need a pipe cutting machine because I don't need it to auto feed.
Yep.
But if I have something where I'm cutting pipe, off into different lengths, then I need to have an auto feeder, and a lot of times that's where you're beyond fourth axis. So you have to consider what parts you're making, how much volume are you doing, and then that will determine, should I go fourth axis and save a little bit of money, or should I go with a dedicated pipe cutting machine? And the final part of that is, do you do any square or rectangular tube? Because generally a pipe cutting attachment, a fourth axis, is designed for round. A tube cutting machine can be built for cutting square and rectangular tube.
Perfectly stated.
Thank you.
Question number 3. Does the manufacturer of the bit really make a difference? Amazon bits are cheaper.
Yep, Amazon bits are cheaper. A lot of times you can buy import bits. You can buy stuff cheap. Yes, the quality of the bit absolutely matters. It's like putting a quality tire on your vehicle. If you can have the fastest sports car in the world and you put cheap tires on it, and that car doesn't handle worth a crap. And the tire wears out and things happen, and eventually, the road noise is so annoying. And it's the same thing about bits. Buying the right bit will bring your machine to life. And, specifically things like Frost Tooling, Vortex Tools, those bit companies are more money than a cheap bit, but they're going to last longer. The tool lasts longer. You get more cuts out of them. You can a lot of times hear the cut quality differences when the bit is running because there's less harmonics, less noise. The bit isn't working as hard to get through the material. In fact, I had a customer that recently posted in our user group about this topic, and I had suggested those two companies, and they ended up buying one of them, and they said that was the sharpest bit they've ever seen. They cut their partner's hand taking it out of the packaging. That. Yeah, and that's why it's so important, because the quality of the tool can really make a difference in the quality of the parts you're taking off the machine.
I mean, it goes back to what we talked about the last couple episodes. Right. I mean, there's certain things that you just invest a little bit extra money in, right?
Right.
So you buy one expensive set of bits compared to 5 cheaper ones that you just break all day long.
Right.
Makes sense to just buy the good ones.
And I've always told people, like, when you first start learning, buy the cheap Amazon bits because you're going to break them.
Sure.
Who cares? Right? But don't expect the same quality that you're going to get as you learn. And when you get dialed in, you start to figure out, okay, now buy quality tools and stick with that. Don't ever go back, because companies like Frost and Vortex are going to do better by you than buying from a cheap import company.
Yep. 100%.
So
that's all we got this week.
Cool. All right. Well, that answers it.
Great job as always.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate the questions. But as always, obviously, if you got questions, concerns, comments, send them our way. We love to address them on the show. It allows us to talk about things like that, and hopefully you learn something. So without further ado, we're going to jump back into the topic, which was, talking a little bit about considering making fairly big purchases or investments during slow times. And I want to talk about that because the opportunity in slow times is often overlooked, right? For one, you can capitalize on your downtime, because when you are slower, you have more time to invest in research, right? You can spend the time actually doing your due diligence, where oftentimes if you're trying to buy stuff when you're busy and under high demand and you already don't have enough hours in the day, you're going to cut corners.
Sure.
You're going to maybe miss something, which is going to cause you to buy something inappropriately. You might buy something that doesn't do what it needs to do. It might not be longevity-wise, whatever. The other thing it does is it allows you to install and train your people or yourself on how to use the product the right way.
That was my first thought, is if you have a job that is due in a week, obviously It's not a good time to put a machine in. I mean, obviously
Sometimes you don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice.
So
But
I won't ridicule people for doing that because sometimes
Sure,
it happens.
That was the wrong way to word it. But if you have, say your next job isn't due for a month,
right.
and you have time to put that machine in place, and you can take your time to do the drawings, take your time to do the cutting, and you don't feel rushed like you have to get this done in 2 days, you can take the time to kind of take it slow, learn it, figure it out, and still do it right the first time and have high quality the first time, while not feeling like you're rushed and overwhelmed with having to force it out.
A lot of times that's exactly it. Like the anxiety that you put on yourself because you're under pressure and you have zero room for error is why I like the idea when it slows down. I can learn the equipment. I can play with it. I can try things. I can play with bits. I can try different feeds and speeds. I don't have to be under the gun of I have to get this done in 7 days, right? And I've often said that you're going to get a better quality part when you can use the tool appropriately.
Absolutely.
And that's the big thing is that the pressures that come along with deadlines cause you to make mistakes. And so having more time allows you to be better with your equipment. You also set yourself up for increased efficiencies long term because if you can develop a process around the machine and you can tailor your workflow in your shop through the machine, things aren't going to slow down to go backwards, right? You're streamlining. It's how we built production here at ShopSabre, is we built a building that things flow through a set process where when you're rushing, sometimes it's just, it's got to go here, then it's got to go here. And you're not really like efficient, right? And so I think that's something to think about is that when your business does pick up later on, because it will, right? It's going to come back. And when it comes back and it's busy as it was, now you have the tools in place to weather it better.
Yes.
And, you're building for that future at that point. And that's really what's important to me is that you can invest now in increased capacity for later or tomorrow, right? And improved quality for the future. And a lot of times the biggest thing that you gain out of it is now you know how to do it efficiently. So now your lead times can be lower. So when the demand goes up, your lead time does not.
Because you're already very efficient and very
correct.
Using your time well to do the things you're doing.
Yep. And a lot of people, something I also hear from people is like, well, I already have equipment, so I'm not going to replace the equipment right now. Well, have you ever considered that maybe your old equipment is holding you back? Because I've done it, I know that, where I've bought tools for my race shop and I refuse to get rid of them. And I think, well, why? Because they work great. And then my buddy will come over with some new fancy tool that he bought and we do something that takes, example, valve springs. I did valve springs on one of my race motors. And I have the old school valve spring compression tool, right? And I did the whole process and it takes me like a solid couple hours to do valve springs with my tool that I had, but it works. It works. He brought up his fancy new tool and we did one side of the motor in under 30 minutes. So obviously two sides of the motor, it's under an hour.
Yep.
But I'm like,
half the time.
It was so fast. Like his tools were so efficient. And obviously if I did it for a living, I would invest in what he's doing, right? But you think about the outdated technology and what it can limit you on, right? As technology evolves, so does the world. Everybody's demands go faster. Software gets better, computers get better, motors get better. Everything about a machine gets better. And if you're competing with old technology, your competition gets better while you remain the same.
And the number one thing on that list is probably your quality, right?
Right. Because old machines, a lot of times, while they can be workhorses, right? They're really strong and really, there's a lot of good old equipment. They're limited by technology. And therefore, they can only go so fast. And then getting parts for them takes time because they're old parts and they're discontinued and it's hard to get them. And therefore, it limits your growth because you can only go as fast as your equipment allows you to. And so having, something that maxes out at a much slower speed than what maybe something new does, it's going to limit what you can put on that machine, right?
And then it's going to go back to if you can't get the parts, you're going to have delays and downtime and not be able to continue putting out work, right?
Right. And I think new technology increases your reliability for one. I mean, it gives you more confidence. How many times have you heard people talk about old equipment where they're like, I don't know, man, I hope the machine doesn't break down. I think your confidence in taking tight, timelines is less because if you build in some downtime in case you got to fix the machine, I just think that there's something to be said there. The accuracy, if I don't have to take something off the machine and then go do a secondary operation to it because now the machine is more accurate. Right. Like that's going to save me. And then the cost of delays, I think, are always something to think about. Even though you're not maybe as busy as you'd like to be, adding more delays or adding more labor because something takes you longer is still costly, right?
Well, and then when you do have new business come in,
right,
if you're still doing things slower, staying behind, right, you're going to have to give a longer lead time.
That, and I think the other thing to consider is if I charge you $100 to do a job, and it takes me an hour to do it, I made $100 an hour.
Yep.
If I charge you $100 to do that job and now my new machine can do it in 30 minutes, I made $200 an hour.
Correct.
You pay yourself more by being more efficient. So especially if I'm doing less work, right? Business is not as busy as it used to be. Profitability becomes more important. Yes. And people often look at investing in equipment as less profitable, but investing in equipment today is building for tomorrow. You're not building for today.
I mean, if you invest in equipment and it's less profitable, you're doing something wrong, right?
Right.
I mean, there shouldn't be any reason why it's less profitable to invest.
You should gain, right? There should be something that you're going to gain. And what do you want to look for in new equipment, right? Like what's a smart investment choice? Well, buying something that is going to add capabilities you don't currently have, right? Maybe you can't do your own MDF doors. You've been outsourcing this. Well, that's a great way to bring revenue in-house, but also now you can sublet time on that machine. You can build doors for other people. So now you've added another revenue stream. Even though I'm not selling more jobs, my competitors now are coming to me with some of their work. So now I've picked up some work during a slow time.
Maybe you had an influx of closet work come in, and now you need a boring head on your machine to drill all them holes.
Right.
And now you can have that where you didn't have it before.
Improved efficiencies are it's a big part of it. Reducing your waste. Having a CNC machine is an example, like having the ability to do, I've had customers that cut parts that use clamps and they upgrade to a vacuum machine. They're like, I can't believe how much more efficient I am. I don't spend as much money on waste. Like, you're throwing away less material, which then saves you money. So when things are slower, you're spending less on material, but creating the same amount of output.
Yep.
And so production speeds make a difference. Obviously, being able to produce something in-house versus waiting on outsourcing, it saves you time. You consider, being able to have support and warranty. A lot of times that's overlooked, but when things slow down, now you don't have a burden of something breaking outside of warranty and then you having to pay for it, or having to pay for support and having a service tech come out and it costs you money. Now you have whatever the service plan that comes with a new piece of equipment. So sometimes scalability, looks different than what you think. It's not having to invest money into things that you would have, and now you can take the money you would have put in other areas into marketing or into product development.
Which is all obviously going to lead to more business, more profit,
right?
More money in your pocket,
right?
More everything.
And I think that's the thing. So the key takeaways as you kind of think about that is you're going to invest in new equipment, right? Well, why? Well, it's because I'm going to produce more later. It's not about just today. I'm going to get efficient today. Tomorrow, when things start to come back, it's the same reason why you see people invest in real estate during downturns, right? The land becomes cheaper because somebody's losing it or has to get rid of it. They have to liquidate it. And thus, when things rebound, now that land's worth more money. It's a return on their investment.
Right.
It's the same mentality with your CNC machine. You might get a better deal or a discount or a price during a slower time that is going to produce you more revenue later on. It's not about today. It's about what can you produce with that machine in 3 to 5 years.
And every time we talk about this topic, I always think back to the guy that told us that he was now the guy that tells everybody yes instead of no all the time. And that's what it does for you, right? Like,
correct.
It gives you the ability to do that.
Right. You don't want to wait until you're too busy. And I always remind that because I think my favorite thing I talk about is when people talk about the economy, right? Oh, I want to watch what the economy's doing. Forever? Is that what you're going to do? You're going to wait forever? Because unless you're closing your doors, which I don't know a business owner who's like, I'm just going to close down and be done.
Right.
So unless you're closing your doors, then that doesn't exist to you. And I don't know why we're talking. But everybody else who's out there, the other 95% of people, the economy is never perfect. Because you're either waiting for it to rebound because things could be better, or things are so great that you're waiting for it to fall off.
Right.
Oh man, I got to wait. I want to see what happens now next year. Things are too good right now. Like, you're always waiting. Good business owners don't worry about what could happen. They plan for the future. And that is building their futures and buying things that are going to help improve their businesses. And sometimes that's spending a little bit of money to ensure that their growth, when their competitors are scrambling, they're not anymore.
Right. Think about what you're going to make happen in the future.
And if there's not a lot of business out there right now, right? Maybe you're slowing down. Then you need to go take from your competitors. Well, how do you do that? By being more efficient, by being the guy in the town who can say yes, by being the guy who can offer a better price to the cabinet builders, by being the guy who's going to do more for them in one stop. Hey, yeah, I can cut your cabinets, but I can also do your doors, your drawers. I can do everything at one spot. You send the job to me, I'll do the whole thing.
And I can also get it done in half the time.
Right, and I'll get it done on your timeline.
Yeah.
So those are the things you have to think about. So investing in new equipment during slow periods of time can be a proactive way to create a busier time, right? To grow, to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. I mean, I think of Hatch Exhibits, right? Really good customer of ours. But during COVID, when he was in the trade show business. So think about that. Imagine being in a trade show events business during COVID. Well, events weren't happening.
Right.
Trade shows were getting shut down. It would have been easy to shut the doors and just been like, well, can't do anything. He bought equipment. And you know what he did with that? He quick turned into a PPE manufacturer. He built face shields, dividers. He opened up, and he's to this day still has a business that specializes in PPE, and his trade show business came back. So now he's bought more equipment. He's massively growing. But it's because he wasn't afraid to take a risk on himself. He knew that the growth was there. He had the equipment. And like he said, the reason he was able to do it, he didn't just go out and buy a brand new machine the first day. The first day, he took the equipment he already owned and pivoted because it was versatile. It was a ShopSabre router. He was able to go start routing, got the contracts, and then suddenly realized, I can't keep up. Had to buy another machine. Now he has multiple pieces of ShopSabre equipment because he wasn't afraid to do something, and he had the right equipment in his shop. So when tough times hit, he could be versatile while his competitors were shutting shops down.
He went out there and took the work, right?
Took their business, right? And I think that's something you have to think about is you don't want to wait till the perfect time exists because it's never going to exist, right?
No.
You're never going to find. There's always going to be concerns in the world, but your real call to action is always like, what does your 5-year plan look like? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Explore what future equipment looks like and look at what maybe you can buy today for less than it's going to cost you. Because in 5 years, it's probably going to cost you more money.
For sure. Yes, it is.
So, reach out to us. If you're wondering about CNC machines, let's see what we can offer you. You might find that old machine that you own, might be getting you by, but it's worth something today because it's still running. You might get something on the used market for it for a guy who doesn't have one. So you could upgrade to something newer, faster, better, has maybe that missing vacuum table or that tool changer. Or maybe you want to go to a high def cutter instead of standard definition. Now's a perfect chance for you to do it.
Right.
So again, there's a lot of ways for you to shape it. And I think that's the biggest thing. So as you kind of think your way through it, that's why investing in equipment during a slow time oftentimes is the best investment you can make. And so today's motivational quote for you is, just because you slow down does not mean you're not progressing. And so I remind you, just because things are slowing, your business could be growing still, just at a slower rate than you like. And therefore, don't be the person that pushes the brakes on it, right?
Right. And I think you don't necessarily also look at the growth as being immediate, right?
Right.
Like you can do the things we talked about and invest in your business while it's slow to come out of it in a better place when it gets busy again.
Right. And I always remind my kids this, that life's a marathon, not a sprint. Because a lot of times kids' attention spans, they want everything to happen today.
Yep.
And I remind them that you're like, my son is a big person in hockey, right? He loves hockey. He loves everything about hockey. But he's not a big person. I don't know why I said that. He's a small person. But he's really active in hockey is what I meant to say. And he goes to a lot of like goalie clinics and camps. And he gets so mad because he goes to them and then he goes and plays in a game and he's like, I don't know why I go to practice. I still can't stop that. And I'm like, dude, like, you don't just go to practice and suddenly, now you're never going to let a goal in like that again.
Right.
Like I remind him, like Marc-Andre Fleury, Hall of Fame goalie, right? Future Hall of Fame goalie. He goes to practice every day. Why do you think he goes to practice? Because he's still trying to polish his skills, right?
Eventually going to make that one save, right?
And that's exactly it. Repetition builds memory, and memory is eventually where you succeed, right?
Correct.
So
Yep.
It's just having the ability to be familiar in unfamiliar situations is really what builds, and that's where your business is the same way. You got to be willing to try things, do things, evolve, because if you don't, you're just going to get stagnant.
Right.
And so that's what I know. So just because you slow down does not mean you're not progressing. That's today's motivational quote. So keep going, keep doing your thing. We're going to keep doing our thing.
Sure are.
Be back with another episode. Again, as always, I appreciate you guys tuning in to Talkin Shop. Hopefully you find some education out of some of what we talk about. Sometimes what we talk about makes absolutely zero sense, and we understand that because, well, we're just two idiots in a room with some microphones. So
True story.
But yeah, with that, I am Brandon.
And I'm Nick.
Thanks for tuning in to Talkin Shop. Till next time.